After surviving a battle against the strongest man in the history of the planet, Baki takes a full body test to check if his physical condition is okay. After checking the test results, the doctor, Shinogi, calls a neuroscientist named Mogi over there, as he can't believe his eyes after seeing what Baki's brain looks like. Seeing the folds and creases of the brain, Shinogi tells Mogi that Baki's brain looks more demonic than human. Shinogi thinks that these demonic folds on Baki's brain are correlated to how his character developed, just like his father Yujiro's. But that's just a theory for now, so Mogi wants to conduct more research on Baki's brain, as he finds it amusing. Even he, a man of science, doesn't believe that this is the brain of a human and strongly believes that it's the brain of a demon instead. At the same time, somewhere in a park in Tokyo, thousands of panicking rats begin to run in hordes after sensing a demonic presence, none other than the young man Baki Hanma, who has just come to the park for a walk. On the other hand, Baki's girlfriend Kazue wakes up from her sleep, remembering Muhammad Ali Jr.'s handsome, beautiful face being stripped away from its confidence. She wonders if she made the wrong choice by choosing to side with Muhammad Ali Jr. back then. When she hugged Muhammad Ali Jr., seeing him cry after he lost the fight against Baki, he asked her why she held him with so much compassion. In reply, she told him that she did it out of love, just like a mother would, and made it clear to him that she is still in love with Baki. Muhammad Ali Jr. realized what a two-faced bitch Kazue is, so he walked away from her. Anyway, the next day, while going to school, Kazue meets with Baki on the way and jokes around with him just as a friend. After rebonding their lost connection at school, Baki goes out in the streets for a walk and gets robbed by random thugs. Unfortunately for the thugs, Baki is one of the strongest men on Earth, and even they realize that they are preying on an actual predator. A man named Kiryagawa comes there to save those weaklings before Baki can beat them to death, and tells the thugs that they are lucky to be unscathed. After the thugs run away, acknowledging the danger, Baki properly greets Kiryagawa and politely asks him what his business is here. They go to a coffee shop, and there, Kiryagawa tells Baki that he has predicted that Baki and his father Yujiro's fight will happen very soon. Kiryagawa reminds Baki that he needs to avenge his mother and even kill Yujiro if that is what it takes. Baki remembers when he challenged Yujiro 5 years ago and was beaten brutally, so he is still unsure if he will be able to win against him now. But what Baki is more unsure of is if he should only hate Yujiro for killing his mother, as he believes there are other people who are also involved in his mother's death. Baki explains to Kiryagawa that the only reason he believes that is because his mother, Emi Ikusawa, was not a normal woman. She had married a rich man to secure comfort for herself, but when she met the strongest man in the world, Yujiro, she basically cheated her rich husband to be with Yujiro. Yujiro made things easy for her and killed her husband so that she could be with him. Yujiro realized how much Emi too loved watching blood and gore, so he married her to make sure that she became the mother of his child. Soon after Baki was born, Emi made sure to raise him to be an elite fighter. Of course, she did all of this only to gain the love of Yujiro, the ultimate alpha male. She didn't care about her son, who shared her blood, and only prepared him as a gift for Yujiro. On the other hand, Yujiro didn't care for Emi and only wanted his son to be strong enough so that he could fight someone without holding back. Yujiro even made it clear to Emi that she would be considered good for nothing if her son failed to please him. Failing to get Yujiro's love, Emi became mentally unstable and even beat up Baki for being a weakling. So, Baki trained to become worthy of her mother's love. But that was not good enough, and she died at the end because he was weak. That's why Baki doesn't blame Yujiro only for killing her mother but also for not being strong enough to protect her. Baki tells Kiryagawa that when Yujiro was hugging Emi to her death, she cried out of happiness as her deepest desires were fulfilled and she finally felt like a woman. Kiryagawa respects how weird of a woman Emi was but tells Baki to no longer make his life decisions for the sake of his mother. He thinks that Baki's life is as important as Emi's, so he tells Baki to stop trying to please his dead mother or his inhumane father. Instead, Baki should only think of himself and lead the life he truly wants. But Baki tells Kiryagawa that his true desire is to fight against his father. He explains that when he got punched by Yujiro, he heard the voice of an angel, and that made him realize how far he was from measuring up to him. When Yujiro was about to kill Baki, Emi stopped him and even punched him to make him stop. She challenged the strongest man on Earth to save Baki's life and sacrificed hers. That is why Baki feels the need to repay his mother's debts and wants to fulfill her wishes. To do so, Baki knows he needs to be the absolute strongest in the words and finally makes Kiryagawa understand why he needs to fight Yujiro. They both recollect the memories of the past, and right after Baki begins training for the fight against Yujiro, not to avenge his mother but to repay her love. Meanwhile, at a military facility, Yujiro goes to fight the strongest man in the United States, Oliver Biscuit, just for fun. For the fight, Yujiro wears boxing gloves on both of his hands and gets ready for the duel against Biscuit. Before the duel begins, Biscuit asks Yujiro how he feels now that his son has survived against the strongest man in the history of Earth. In reply, Yujiro expresses that he is somewhat proud of the weakling that he calls Baki because he made the primitive man use martial arts. Anyway, their duel begins, and as predicted, Yujiro basically toys with the strongest man in the United States. On the other side, the Prime Minister of Japan goes to meet with Tokugawa for some guidance. He tells Tokugawa that the weight of Japan's responsibility is sometimes so heavy that it makes him regret becoming Prime Minister. To lighten the Prime Minister's weight, Tokugawa gives him a crapload of money and asks him for a favor in return. After hearing what Tokugawa wants, the Prime Minister goes to consult with the Minister of Defense and tells him that Tokugawa wants the country's tacit approval of letting Yujiro and Baki fight. The Prime Minister seems to be unaware of Yujiro, so the Defense Minister educates him and tells him everything about Earth's strongest man. The Defense Minister tells him that even though Yujiro is the strongest only by brute strength, no armed forces would be enough to hold him down. Additionally, he tells the Prime Minister about the incident a few years ago when Yujiro assaulted the previous Prime Minister and even easily beat 100 fully equipped riot police. After that, the former Prime Minister placed a gag order on the incident to maintain public order because Yujiro's existence was enough to shake the country. The Prime Minister can't believe that Japan's military weapons, like missiles, won't be enough to take down an unarmed man. He even learns that the United States has formed a treaty of friendship with Yujiro because they are scared of him. So, the Prime Minister finally understands how dangerous Yujiro is and realizes that he is no less than a demon. The Prime Minister asks if it is possible to kill Yujiro with a sniper, but he learns that no one is stupid enough to make that mistake as Yujiro is the most powerful weapon in the world. So, Japan's best option is to make him an ally to make sure they can secure their win over any other country. One of the Prime Minister's assistant tells him that whether it is a minister, an artist, or a soldier, if any of them had been born with the brute strength of Yujiro, they would have used their strength to achieve their dreams. They all would have chosen the path to become Earth's most dangerous man, just like Yujiro did. I have no clue what that dude meant, but politicians never make sense anyway, so let's just move on from that. It looks like Captain Stridham is in the middle of training his soldiers in martial arts. He spars with one of his soldiers and tells him to attack him with the intent to kill. But everyone fails to beat the old man and gets knocked out by him almost instantly. After beating everyone up, the captain teaches them more about martial arts and then goes back to his warehouse to craft a weapon that can help him win against monsters like Yujiro. Of course, he is only doing it for the sake of his country, as Yujiro has threatened to end the treaty with the United States if Captain Stridham fails to kill him in a year. While the captain is training to become stronger, Yujiro comes there to mock him for being as weak as ever. The captain looks for an opportunity to attack Yujiro by surprise, but he realizes soon that he is not well prepared enough to beat him. On the other side, Baki trains like usual in his training room and sweats as if he is drenched in rain. He imagines Yujiro as his opponent to fight against, and he engages in a battle with him. Their imaginary battle creates such shockwaves that everyone in Tokyo thinks a heavy earthquake has hit them. Well, Baki loses the fight against the imaginary Yujiro, so he decides to train even harder. Yujiro visits Tokugawa and tells him that he should check up on his health as he is growing older. Tokugawa thanks Yujiro for worrying about his health, but knowing that it's just small talk, he asks Yujiro what his real purpose is here. Yujiro gets mad for no reason and unintentionally hurts Tokugawa with his telekinesis power. After leaving the place, Yujiro reveals that he has obtained a new power to identify the weakness of anyone with just his eyesight. Basically, he has received X-ray vision like Superman, and that might bring more trouble for Baki to beat him. Meanwhile, Ritsu goes to a random boxing gym to join as a member, but the gym coach rejects him as he is missing a leg. Ritsu tells him that he is worthy of becoming a fighter and destroys a sandbag with just a punch to prove it. Tokugawa wakes up in a hospital after getting knocked unconscious by Yujiro and gets visited by the famous Dr. Shinogi, who suggests that Tokugawa rest there for a while. Somewhere else, the super welterweight MMA champion, Akio Mani, becomes famous countrywide for winning all of his pro fights in first-round knockouts. Journalists from everywhere come to his gym to take an interview with Akio, and one of them asks what he plans to do in the future. Akio tells him that he is only currently focusing on fighting in the ring and is hoping to face opponents who have actual potential. He confidently claims that there is no one who can beat him and makes a bet that he will win the next title match by knocking out his opponent in the first 3 minutes. After the interview, Akio continues practicing at the gym and notices the sandbag that Ritsu destroyed completely. Learning about Ritsu, Akio gets intrigued and looks for him at the gym. Upon seeing Ritsu, Akio desires to spar with him, but Ritsu refuses to fight against him, as he thinks Akio is too much of a weakling in comparison to him. Seeing the overconfidence of Ritsu, Akio only gets more interested in fighting him and eagerly puts on the boxing gloves. So, Ritsu jumps in the boxing ring and gets ready to humble the MMA champion. Before the duel begins, Ritsu promises Akio that he will show him the true kung fu hidden behind boxing. Atsu hesitantly goes for the first punch, but gets knocked out cold in the blink of an eye by Ritsu. After the short end of the duel, everyone, including the gym coach, gets confused. The coach sees Ritsu meditating, which he doesn't like, so he tells him to do typical boxing training instead of meditating. However, Ritsu believes that his own training method is the best and asks the coach to bring any powerful boxer in front of him to prove him wrong. Ritsu bets that if any boxer can beat him, he will stop training using his method and instead do proper modern boxing training. Before the coach says anything, Akio stops him and comes in front of Ritsu, acknowledging him as a winner. Akio tells Ritsu that because of his arrogance, he might turn all the boxers in the world against him, and that might not end well for him. Meanwhile, at the Shinshikai headquarters, Katsumi practices his karate against a plastic bag. He knocks it around everywhere when suddenly Baki comes there, using the window, and also joins in beating the poor plastic bag. Seeing Baki here suddenly, Katsumi asks him why he is here. Baki explains that he is just here to check up on him to see how the man who got his hand eaten by Pickle is doing currently. Katsumi doesn't think about what he has lost and tells Baki that he only thinks about what he can gain. So, he's learning a new technique to become even stronger than before. Baki gets impressed hearing Katsumi's conviction and relates to him as both of them are sons of one of the strongest fighters. They resume messing around with the plastic bag, and Katsumi mentions that he has heard Baki will soon fight Yujiro. Baki tells Katsumi that although he no longer hates his father, he has still decided to fight him. Baki shows him how much he has improved and cuts the plastic bag in half without even moving his legs. Katsumi gets impressed and tells Baki that he shouldn't have any reason to fight Yujiro since they are father and son. While Shinogi shows Takugawa how much his lungs have been damaged, Baki learns from Katsumi that the legendary kung fu master Ritsu has chosen a path to learn boxing. Katsumi explains that Ritsu intends to climb his way up to being a boxing champion only using his kung fu skills, and he thinks it won't be easy. Even though kung fu is an ancient martial art, it cannot be easily used in boxing because many of its moves go against the rules. Most importantly, modern boxing has improved a lot itself, so Katsumi thinks Ritsu might face some hardships along the way. Hearing everything, Baki thinks Ritsu is an idiot for getting involved in something so stupid. The next morning, while the other boxers are already training at the gym, Ritsu meditates with his traditional method. The coach doesn't like that, so he makes Ritsu get in the ring to fight with a former military soldier and tells him to spar with him. Their duel begins, and at first glance, Ritsu sees how much talent his opponent has. Ritsu even takes the first hit to perceive how strong his opponent is, and after realizing that he is also a weakling, Ritsu hits him right on the skull. Meanwhile, Yujiro goes to a restaurant with Captain Stridum to eat and learns something about Baki that makes him furious. Things keep moving back and forward, and eventually Ritsu finishes off his sparring opponents in mere seconds. Yujiro asks Stridum for more details and learns when Stridum went to meet Baki. Baki told him that he wanted to have a leisurely meal with his father. Although it is quite normal for a normal father and son to have a meal together, since Baki and Yujiro aren't a normal family, Stridum told Baki that he was being ridiculous. Baki remained persistent and only wanted to have a normal father-son moment with Yujiro. Stridum disapproved of that idea and made it clear to Baki that two alpha males of a jungle cannot share a wholesome moment together. Still, Baki expressed his desire to see his father cook a bowl of rice for him. Hearing all of it from Stridum, Yujiro doesn't take the fact lightly that Baki wants him to cook rice for him and barges out of the restaurant in rage. Japan's Prime Minister goes to privately welcome the United States of America's president, not Barack Obama, who just arrived in Japan. He takes the president to a private meeting and tells him about the near future event where Yujiro is going to be involved in a fight. So, the prime minister would like the US president to assist them in tackling this incident. Yujiro Hanma, who possesses national-level strength, will be fighting his son, Baki, who also possesses national-level strength. So, one of the ministers gets scared and proposes to just let the father and son do as they please since it's more of a family issue than a national issue. The US president stops him from saying anything else and tells everyone that he isn't scared of Yujiro or Baki because he has his guardian angel, Coal Dust, that he can turn into diamonds using Yujiro's power. But before he can flex his presidential power, Yujiro comes there to embarrass him. Outside the politicians' meeting building, the 3 brawny guards who were supposed to be guarding the guards are unconscious, all thanks to Yujiro. Yujiro not only beat those men but knocked out every single person in the building just to get to the US president and Japan's prime minister. Yujiro gets mad at the president for trying to flex on the others by using him as a mere tool. He asks for the president's right hand and pours the coal dust into his hand. As the coal dust mimics the shape of a crucifix, Yujiro tells the president to repeat the oath that he took when he begged him to be the US's friend. In fear, the president repeats the speech that he made and also the part where he promised that he would never try to interfere in Yujiro's personal matters. Yujiro points that part out and asks Obama why he is sticking his nose into Yujiro's and his son's private matters after taking an oath not to. Obama explains to Baki that a conflict between him and his son is like a conflict between 2 nations. That is why the politicians are trying to tackle this situation. Yujiro smiles, realizing how pathetic the old leaders are, and before leaving, gives them a final warning not to mess with him or his family. At Japan's international airport, a world-renowned promoter named Kaiser lands on his plane to take up a fight. But he doesn't reveal who in Japan he wants to fight with. On the other side, Ritsu continues training at the gym and keeps meditating in the same position for the last 2 hours. So, the gym coach calls the chairman, hoping that he will be the one to fix Ritsu. But even he doesn't seem to know what to do with him. Kaiser unsurprisingly enters the gym and stands right beside Ritsu to appreciate his beauty. After staring at him for a while, Kaiser asks Ritsu if he can talk with him for a minute. But he gets yelled at instead because he interrupts Ritsu's training. So, he apologizes to Ritsu and once again asks him if he can do him a favor by showing him his strength. Ritsu agrees to do it and puts on a boxing glove to get this over with. He punches so hard in the air that even his boxing glove tears into pieces in a matter of seconds. Everyone at the gym, including Kaiser, gets amazed, and he tells Ritsu that tearing a boxing glove means war between Kung Fu and boxing. Kaiser comes up with a plan to set up Ritsu against the strongest boxer in the world in a match to see which martial art is stronger, Kung Fu or boxing. Kaiser imagines how that match will be and how much the world will be seeing a Kung Fu master fight the greatest boxer ever. For that match, Kaiser asks Ritsu to come with him to the United States of America, and Ritsu happily accepts the challenge. Meanwhile, Baki keeps training regularly and prepares food for himself all alone. While eating, Baki shows a glimpse of how much he has gone crazy for not having a family. He begins to talk with himself and acts as if Yujiro is sitting beside him, gossiping with him about food. While gossiping, Baki gets into an argument with his imaginary dad, and that ends up triggering a fight between them. But Baki himself gets bored of role-playing alone and decides to go to school for now. As he gets ready to go to school, Kezue comes to his house, suspecting Baki lives with someone. Like every other girlfriend in the world, they walk together to school, and Baki acts as carefree as ever, even though he is quite depressed on the inside. After school, Baki resumes training his body, and while meditating, he sees a cockroach. Baki acknowledges a cockroach's adaptive ability, and wishes to be just like it so that he can survive in every condition. Baki mimics the characteristics of cockroaches and turns the insides of his body into a liquid texture, just like a cockroach. Thanks to that, he manages to increase his fighting speed by a mile, and succeeds in becoming even stronger than before. On the other hand, Kaiser takes Ritsu to the most celebrated city, Las Vegas, but after taking a glance at the bright city, Ritsu begins to hate it and calls it a fake for trying to have everything in the world in this small place. He even compares Las Vegas with some crude fighting styles that try to fake pure martial arts like Kung Fu. However, Kaiser doesn't care about Ritsu's opinion and tells him to just do what he came here for. Kaiser and Ritsu then go to watch the former boxing champion win a main event. Kaiser uses the opportunity, takes the stage, and introduces the Kung Fu master, Ritsu, to the crowd present there. Kaiser thanks Ritsu for coming inside the ring and appreciates him being so cooperative. Andre asks Kaiser why he suddenly took the stage and overshadowed his winning moment. Kaiser tells Andre that he only did that because there is a man who insults his existence, and that man is none other than Ritsu. Of course, it was just a lie to get Andre to box with Ritsu, and thankfully, Andre fell for it. Ritsu even joins in on Kaiser and calls Andre a big man with no brains, which makes Andre's blood boil. But before he takes Ritsu on a match, Kaiser decides to showcase Ritsu's kung fu strength to the crowd to hype them up. But before Ritsu can break cement blocks to show off his power, Andre does it instead and shows that he can also use karate. Ritsu still goes for his turn and hits the cement block with so much strength and precision that it turns into pure sand. Now that the crowd is totally hyped up, Kaiser announces the match between Ritsu and Andre to the crowd. A press conference is held soon regarding the match, and there, the journalists ask Ritsu about his history and career as a fighter. Ritsu happily tells them about his journey as a fighter and adds that he has never officially fought anyone. So, the journalists ask him about his unofficial fights details, but Ritsu fails to explain anything, as his previous fights were not a means for public entertainment but for public safety. After failing to communicate with Ritsu properly, the journalists turn to Kaiser, asking him what the rules of the fight between Ritsu and Andre will be. Kaiser explains that the rules are simple, and the two fighters will compete using the strength of their fists. He tells everyone that this will be a fight between two beasts, and invites everyone to come watch this great event. Later at the hotel, Ritsu's gym coach calls him disrespectful for challenging a former boxing champion like that. The coach thinks that Ritsu has no chance of winning against Andre, and even launches a jab at him to prove it. But Ritsu doesn't dodge the punch, and because of that, the coach's hand itself dislocates as if he hit a steel wall. Ritsu fixes the coach's hand and tells him that he has no intention to disrespect boxing and only wants to represent Kung Fu to the world. The exhibition match soon begins, and Ritsu enters the ring, eager to fight Andre. Before the fight begins, Andre acts angry towards Ritsu and even tries kicking him deliberately to hype up the crowd. The match begins, and Andre starts moving like a monkey for no reason. So, Ritsu puts himself in a corner, as he has changed his mind and no longer wants to fight Andre. But Andre isn't just going to let this happen and comes to attack anyway. So, Ritsu quickly finishes with lightning speed punches and ends the match by smashing Andre's face. After the match, Kaiser wins a lot of money and congratulates Ritsu on becoming the most sensational Chinese person in the United States. It's no surprise because everyone in the United States of America has seen Ritsu's masterful technique live. When he won the match, the announcer asked Ritsu about his technique, and Ritsu simply said that he only displayed the dominance of Kung Fu. As for his finishing punch, Ritsu called the technique a no-inch punch. Ritsu told the announcer that he wasn't showboating and wanted to fight another formidable opponent as soon as possible. Because of that comment, the entire world has now turned against Ritsu, according to Kaiser, and he thinks Ritsu will soon face monsters who will make him want to run away. Kaiser puts his legs on both sides of the stackload of money and tells Ritsu to take how much he wants since he is the one who earned it. Ritsu thinks Kaiser's gesture is disrespectful and gives him a warning, telling him that he will shatter his impolite feet if he does that again. Kaiser understands that they are not good buddies and hands Ritsu his money properly this time. Going back to Baki's house, his hair suddenly begins to float like Goku, and that makes him realize that Yujiro must be really close. So, Baki quickly makes 2 cups of coffee for him and his father, and before he can even comprehend, he finds his father sitting in his house. Baki sits down as well and gives Yujiro the cup of coffee he just made. Baki asks Yujiro why the sudden visit, but Yujiro doesn't answer him and takes a sip of coffee first. He asks Baki if this is what he wants, father and son sitting together in the same house. Baki hesitantly nods and tells Yujiro that this is what he has wanted for many years. Baki tells Yujiro that there hasn't been a second in his life that he hasn't been afraid of him, the strongest man, and is actually quite scared now. But he respects him and detests him at the same time. Yujiro asks Baki about the time of their upcoming fight, and in reply, Baki tells him that their fight should begin with a trivial thing like a small argument while eating. He tells Yujiro his dreams of having a father-son quarrel inside the house. So, Yujiro agrees to fulfill his petty wish and deliberately calls Baki's coffee bizarre. But instead of arguing, Baki apologizes for serving him a cup of terrible coffee, and completely throws him off. Then Baki stops the act and tells Yujiro that if he wants to fight him, the cause behind it should be real. Baki then asks Yujiro to fulfill another one of his wishes and asks him to make him a cup of nice coffee. Yujiro gets up and makes it clear that he will only make a cup of coffee if Baki can force him to do so. He tears the table apart and leaves, knowing that Baki isn't strong enough to force him to make coffee, and leaves the house. Baki goes outside, realizing that he is this close to turning their father-son relationship normal like others, and tells Yujiro that he should close the door gently next time when he goes outside. He fails to ask Yujiro to make him coffee, as he is trembling in fear and hopes to succeed another time in the near future. At Takugawa's house, Shinogi comes there to request that Takugawa go under treatment to fix his lung illness. But Takugawa clearly wants the illness to progress without resistance, as he wants to leave the mortal world. He lights up a cigarette like every other man who cares for nothing and tells Shinogi that only God will now decide what is going to happen to him from now on. Somewhere in the streets of Tokyo, another chain smoker, Shiba, approaches Baki and tells him to fight him right here and now. Shiba apologizes to Baki for such a sudden request and tells him that he has no apparent reason for wanting to fight him. Baki accepts his challenge and immediately knocks him out. After getting beaten in the blink of an eye, Shiba reveals to us that Hanayama sent him to fight Baki for no reason at all. Shiba gets up quickly and tells Baki that he has turned out to be quite a strong young man. But Shiba thinks Baki is a softie, so Baki promises him he will not hold back the next time. He keeps his promise and begins to throw Shiba around. Shiba remembers Hanayama's words, so he doesn't quit on the idea of fighting Baki, even after losing badly. On the other side, Ritsu watches a boxer named Joe Cruiser, who is the closest to becoming the world champion, and Kaiser tells him that Joe is going to be the next opponent for Ritsu. According to Kaiser, Joe is going to be an easy opponent for Ritsu. Apparently, after winning the championship as an amateur, Joe turned pro and climbed to the top rank after facing a lot of hardship. But he has no talent, so Ritsu doesn't want to end someone's career who has created it with hard work. But it is no longer for him to decide whether he wants to fight or not, as a famous boxer comes to his doorstep to ask him not to fight Joe Cruiser. It is not because he thinks Joe Cruiser will get destroyed, but because he thinks Ritsu will not be able to beat him. According to the famous boxer, Joe fights like he is a smoke of wind who attacks and surrounds the enemies with his smoke. However, Ritsu still takes the challenge and enters the ring to fight Joe Cruiser. He gets intimidated at first after hearing so many things about Joe, and he also gets demotivated by his own boxing coach before the fight. As the match begins, Joe launches dozens of punches at Ritsu that deal lingering damage everywhere. Ritsu realizes that he cannot underestimate this guy, but before he can do anything about it, he gets knocked down on the floor by Joe with a left hook. Ritsu compares the left hook with a sharpened sword and even compares it with Pickle and Baki's punches. Ritsu thinks that it's the boxing gloves that are causing so much damage and keeps going on about how great he has started to think boxing as a sport has become. Even after all these hypotheses, Ritsu's biggest question to himself is how he is going to win against a skilled fighter whose punch is getting him dizzy. On the other side, Shiba follows Baki to his house as he still wants to fight. Baki wonders why Shiba is acting like this and asks Shiba for a reason for his sudden fighting request. Shiba comes up with a stupid reason, so Baki slaps him unconscious and tells him he is too weak. As Baki returns home, Shiba again remembers why he came here today and gets up once again to fight. So, Baki goes outside of his house, not realizing Shiba is just outside, and gets punched by him right in the face. After making Baki's nose bleed, Shiba follows up with more deadly punches and throws Baki around the area while he is contemplating what is going on. Going back to the boxing match, Ritsu begins to feel that his entire surroundings have begun to melt, as if they were surrounded by a mystical smoke. But he doesn't give up and remembers when he felt the same dizziness when he trained under his great kung fu master. Ritsu's master taught him the application of impact and destruction, and thanks to that, Ritsu mastered his defensive techniques. So, he keeps his composure now and changes his form to increase his chances at dodging. Thanks to that, he begins to spin around everywhere and successfully holds his own against the skilled fighter, Joe. On the other hand, Baki learns from Shiba that he must keep his fighting spirit his first priority, and thanks him for teaching him that. Shiba doesn't have time for small talk and immediately comes to attack Baki with an uppercut. Even though his fists get into contact, Baki remains unscathed and knocks out Shiba in seconds once again. After beating him unconscious, Baki returns home and procrastinates for some time. Then he goes out to see if Shiba's still there, but this time he doesn't find him. So, he goes to buy some groceries in peace, and when returning home, the annoying Shiba faces him again and asks him for a fight. Baki knocks him out and thanks him once again for teaching him the important lesson, which is to never give up. Baki tells Shiba that he has noticed Shiba is not fighting like his usual self. So, Baki decides to change his fighting style to Shiba's fighting style, realizing that if he does so, Shiba might finally give up. However, Shiba doesn't think Baki has the guts to fight like him. Baki proves him wrong though and begins to take a beating purposefully to imitate how much beating Shiba takes. Shiba follows it up with a kick, and Baki takes it full on as he is fighting like Shiba. By kicking Baki head on, Shiba's legs bones break apart, implying that Baki is like a metal wall. Apparently, Shiba deliberately makes his opponents target his face, soft nose, lips, and cheeks, and when they attack him with a hard, tough fist, he uses their momentum against them, which causes their bones to break apart. So, Baki used the same technique to break Shiba's legs bones. Baki then fully imitates Shiba and tells him that aiming for vital parts of the opponent is the martial arts way. But Shiba's way is the exact opposite. His way of fighting is not martial art, and so Shiba would never target his opponent's eyes. Since they have changed places now, Baki tells Shiba to poke his eyes for the next attack and wants to see if he can break Shiba's fingers just using his eyeballs. Although Shiba has no intention of doing something so stupid, he knowingly puts out 2 of his fingers. So, Baki uses the opportunity and breaks Shiba's fingers using just his eyeballs at the speed of a bullet. On the other hand, Ritsu remembers training under his master once again. His master told him that since he is inexperienced, anything could happen to him and compared him to a fragile tofu. The master then told Ritsu that when he is struck by an enemy and his brain shakes, it cannot be stopped with half measures. The master's only tip to him was to wait 5 to 10 minutes to recover naturally. But since the opponent won't wait, the master told him that if he wants his brain to stop shaking, he also needs to shake with the same rhythm of the brain. So, now, Ritsu pays attention to his brain shaking and hits his head to cause something like a reverse flow control. The first round ends with Ritsu struggling to win, so he asks his boxing coach to give him some advice. But the coach doesn't know what to tell the kung fu master and only gives him advice to do his best. The next round begins, and Joe immediately kicks Ritsu's head to shake his brain again. But this time Ritsu evades Joe's attack and successfully uses his momentum to make Joe fall to his knees. Joe gets back on his feet again and gets more ready than ever to beat up Ritsu. But Ritsu is only about to get stronger than before and repeatedly lands jabs on Joe's face, making him struggle to stand still. Ritsu remembers learning to jump when fighting from one of his masters, so he uses one of those techniques that he learned from him, uses the ropes of the ring to jump, and hits Joe with an overhead punch. Joe gets up on his feet again and shows incredible perseverance by trying his best to knock out Ritsu. They fight par on par, so Ritsu is left with no other option but to use his signature kung fu move to beat Joe. After getting knocked out, Joe gets up again, telling Ritsu that he enjoyed this match very much. Joe calls Ritsu a true boxer, but Ritsu knows he actually cheated to win. Anyway, the boxing champion congratulates Ritsu on winning and gives him a look, meaning that he also wants to fight him. After taking a good beating from Baki, Shiba returns to Hanayama's residence to give him a report about it. Hanayama thanks Shiba for what he did, even though he didn't do much. Shiba tells Hanayama that he couldn't even touch Baki and only managed to land a few punches because Baki let him punch him. Meanwhile, Baki notices that his eyes are still red, all thanks to his crazy idea to use them to break Shiba's fingers. Shiba tells Hanayama about Baki's crazy move, and hearing that, Hanayama asks Shiba to copy the move that Baki made. Shiba isn't crazy enough to do something like that, and he also mentions that when Baki used that move, his speed was as fast as a bullet train. So, Hanayama thinks that Shiba is surely bluffing hard in his face. Yujiro Hanma, called Ogre, meets with the captain. He tells the captain that Baki has invited him for dinner and expects Baki to cook for him. Captain asks him if he is expecting that much despite knowing that there will be a face-off duel between himself and Baki. But he corrects Captain that it isn't a duel, neither is it a competition. Instead, it is just a customary fight between the father and the son, and it is nothing as serious as that. The captain sees how reluctant he is to that conversation, so he has Ogre if he is now getting soft. Before he finishes his question, Ogre cuts off his cigarette, and Captain realizes Ogre is as serious as usual, so he changes his question and says he knows Ogre is still as hard-hearted as he is. On the other hand, Baki goes shopping for dinner. He has several thoughts, especially about the duel, but regardless, he drives to the temple where he meets Mitsunari. He tells Mitsunari about his plans, and despite knowing that Baki can't stand any weight around Ogre, Mitsunari fully supports all the plans. He says that he would do anything to watch a duel between Baki and Ogre, and it would surely be the most enjoyable event. He even insists that it is a father and son event doesn't mean it should be boring. He goes to the length and says he would deploy all the military personnel in his hand to ensure that the fight occurs. However, Baki reminds him that no matter the amount of military personnel he deploys, they can't stop Ogre, He insists that he is the only one who can ably stop his father, and he is going to do that. He tells Mitsunari that all he seeks is for Mitsunari to stop every civilian from coming toward that area so they won't be injured in any way. Mitsunari promises to deploy the police to his house on the said day. Ogre also meets with a friend, and as they marry, he says he is in love. His friend asks him who he is in love with, and he says he is in love with Baki. He claims all he thinks about recently is Baki, and he hasn't been able to think about anything else. His friend accepts that possibility, and Ogre says he had been getting a strange dream that when he sees Baki, he will find it difficult to lay his hands on Baki. His friend worries if he thinks the dream will come true, but he reminds him it is just a dream that can't come true. Baki also meets with Shibukawa. He tells Shibukawa about the fight, and Shibukawa reminds him about who Ogre is. He says there was a time when every martial artist wanted to fight against Ogre, but now no martial artist wants to do that again because Ogre has become far stronger than any of them. He tells Baki to run away from the duel. He reminds him that no one would laugh at him for running away, as everyone knows Ogre isn't an easy person. Baki insists that it is not a competition that he wants to win, neither is it a war that he wants to achieve, and he can't engage in the fight because he thinks he will win or run away from the fight because he thinks he will lose. Baki returns home, and he prepares the meal. After preparing the meal, he wonders if Ogre will come, and to his shock, Ogre arrives. They sit to eat, and before taking the first bite, Ogre bows. Baki doesn't really know why Ogre is bowing, neither does he know who he is bowing to. He wonders if he is praying or appreciating the efforts that were kept into the food. As they continue eating, Baki talks about how he has been enjoying seaweed roots despite the fact that it is preserved. Ogre tells him that the preservation doesn't make it enjoyable, but it is fine the way he eats it because he is supposed to eat everything, whether natural or preserved, whether poisonous or healthy. Baki considers asking his father to wash the plates. He tells Ogre this, but Ogre doesn't respond. Ogre bows again after finishing the meal, and Baki takes the plate. He asks Ogre to wash the plate again, and Ogre moves towards him with his fists together. He assumes Ogre wants to fight him, but Ogre asks that they play rock, paper, scissors to know who will wash the plate. Baki wins, but Ogre uses his scissors hand to compress Baki's rock and tells him that sometimes scissors can cut a rock. Ogre leaves the house later but finds the police at the door. He confronts them and walks out. Before leaving, Ogre told Baki that Baki had been the one inviting him to dinners, so he wanted to invite Baki on a date the following day. Baki considers what he could wear, and he eventually wears a casual dress. When he gets to the hotel, he sees it's very classy but can't go back to change his clothes. The manager takes him to a private room, and he sees how luxurious the place is. Ogre arrives in a suit and asks why Baki is dressed that way, and Baki tells him it is because no one taught him how to dress. Ogre gets angry, but Baki continues and accuses him of not teaching him how to behave and that all he taught him was how to fight. Ogre doesn't fight it. They sit to eat, and they take their drink. Ogre asks Baki to take the dry cherry drink, after which they eat the foreign meal with a spoon. Baki is shocked to see the luxurious life his father lives. He sees the knowledgeable words Ogre says, and he admits that he doesn't really know who his father is. After the meal, they proceed to order for espresso coffee. When Baki drinks it, he realizes it is very bitter, but he uses that opportunity to bring up the bitter conversation. He asks Ogre why he killed his mother. Ogre gets angry, but Baki insists he deserves to get the answer. He holds Ogre and he asks him what he should do to get the answer to his question. At that moment, the restaurant manager, Mitsuo Nanaka, enters intending to refill their coffee, but the scene he sees shocks him so much. He doesn't know what to do as the drink he holds falls off his hand. He stands and looks at them as Baki asks Ogre what he wants him to do. He asks Ogre if he wants to answer the question as easily and as simply as possible or if he wants them to fight to the extreme before he answers the question. Baki proceeds to hit his father on the glass wall. As he does that, the glass cracks and the entire restaurant begins to shake. According to the manager, the only set of people who didn't feel the restaurant shaking was Baki and Ogre. Baki keeps his father's head by the glass, and everyone wonders what is happening. He tells Ogre that he deserves to know what is going on and he deserves to know why his mother died. Ogre looks at him with no expression, and he kicks Baki. He pushes Baki on the chair, and as the chair shakes and moves, Baki sets himself on the chair and approaches his father. Ogre calls him rude and tells him he will teach him a lesson. Ogre pushes him to the glass, and the glass breaks. Several police officers already occupy the ground floor as they all try to secure the ground. They wonder what is happening on the topmost floor, and fortunately, Baki holds the edge of the wall and stops himself from falling. He jumps back into the building and tries to fight Ogre again, but Ogre hits him and throws him through the glass again. The other part of the glass breaks, but Baki hangs on the wall. He realizes that his father isn't really fighting him because he has been avoiding all the vital parts of the body. Ogre tells Baki that he has been hearing that Baki doesn't acknowledge their duel like a real duel, and he claims it is just a father and son fight. He tells Baki that they are having a fight and Baki should take it as one. However, Baki figures that Ogre is only trying to punish him for what he has done. Ogre takes Baki's hand and says it isn't Baki's fault that he had dragged his clothes. He claims it is the fault of the hand, and he will punish the hand. As he is about to hit Baki's hand, Baki removes his hand, and Ogre hits himself. Ogre gets angry at Baki, reminding him he is not trained well. He pushes Baki through the wall, and the wall breaks. Baki finds himself at the other side of the restaurant, and all the guests wonder if Baki is fine or dead. Ogre enters the compartment through the door. He apologizes and tells them he only tries to train his badly trained son. Baki tries to fight back, but Ogre hits him again and pushes him towards the glass wall. He puts his hand all over Baki's face, and the guests wonder if Baki is still breathing well. He pushes Baki through the glass, and when the glass breaks, they both fall down from the rooftop. Everyone wonders if they will survive that great fall, but as they are about to land, Ogre tells Baki that he should prepare for the landing, and Ogre sets his feet for the fall. They fall on a car, and the car scatters into pieces. No one expects that they will be alive. Later, they inquire from an old sergeant, Akio Kamura, who has done several high falls, and asks if it is possible for a person to survive such a high fall. He tells them the person can land properly, and although it is a very rare circumstance, it is actually what happened in this case. Ogre stands up with his hand on Baki's face. He pushes Baki away, and Baki falls flat on the floor. He walks to Baki and tells him to stand up. He asks if Baki has fainted because of just a little fall. Baki smiles. He asks his father to at least give him his hand so he can help him up because he is quite tired. Ogre gives him his left hand to stand up, but Baki hits him with the other hand. Angrily, Ogre throws Baki into a nearby supermarket. He walks down and meets Baki while Baki is on the floor. He says he knows Baki doesn't want to learn, and he would teach him. After a minor fight between them, he says that he would use a technique that he only uses for women and children, which is the whip strike, which, although he cannot kill, hurts very well. He hits Baki on his back with his palm, and Baki screams in pain. The attack hurts Baki a lot, and he insists that he will have his revenge. He does the same whip strike on Ogre, expecting Ogre to scream the same way he had screamed, but Ogre holds up the pain. He releases all his muscles and flexes his body by clenching his hands together so he doesn't feel the pain. Baki is angry. Tokugawa enters joyfully with another officer. He calls out for Baki and tells him that he has evacuated all the civilians around the area, and Baki is free to fight Ogre anyhow he wishes, and no one would get injured. Ogre says that Tokugawa is so excited about the fight. Ogre hits Baki again and throws Baki to the wall. As Baki stands up, he plans to officially fight Ogre well, and Ogre also tells him he knows that Baki isn't using his full strength, and he says he wants to see all of Baki's strength. Baki realizes something. He feels his father could see that he had been joking all the while. He realizes his father can see his real strength, and he knows how good or bad he is. He decides he can no longer hide his ability from his father, and he has to do what is best and join the fight. Ogre also reminds him that the fight isn't just a father and son fight, and he has to take it as seriously as possible. As a result, Ogre begs Baki to show his real seal. Baki tells Ogre that he has to relax. Baki has spent several years of his life trying to find a new technique. He had dedicated himself to training so hard only for a sole purpose, which is to defeat his father. He tells his father that the technique is relaxing. He has to relax his body, his joints and muscles, and his powers, and bring everything to a liquid form. His body is seen becoming liquid immediately, and with the greatest speed anyone has ever seen in a battle. He brings out his toe, and he runs to hit Ogre. His speed is so fast that only a cockroach can run as fast as he is running. He runs with all of his ability, and even Ogre couldn't see him coming. The technique is called the cockroach tackle, and only the best of the best warriors have reached that level of greatness. He pushes Ogre to the glass, and when Ogre reaches the glass, Ogre tries to defend himself by holding onto his legs. But Baki pushes him away from there and pushes him into the wall. He hits him so much, and when Ogre is calm, he compliments Baki. He says that Baki had been stepping on glasses and stones barefooted, and there is no blood on his leg. He acknowledges that the technique he had just seen Baki use isn't one that is common, and he had seen several martial artists try to train to reach that liquidity level, but none of them have been able to reach it. He asks Baki who his teacher is and says his teacher has done so well. Baki feels the fight is going in his favor and he decides to continue. But Ogre throws up off and he breaks through the wall. In the quarterly urban legend, there is a story about a competition that takes place in a secret place in Japan. In that competition, there is only one rule, which is that it must be on bare fists. Every other thing is accepted, including eye-poking and even fighting. The present winner in that competition is a 17-year-old boy, and the one person who is strong enough to defeat him is his father. That has created the great legend of the father and son fight. Just as Ogre gets outside the wall, he sees several people. The crowd is so large that for a legend like him, he feels terrified. That isn't the first time he fights in front of people, but something about that crowd makes him uncomfortable. You may wonder how the crowd was able to gather quickly. It is all because of the media. Following the fight at the restaurant, the media carried news about the fight and also the news about how they had fallen on the Prime Minister's car and how the car had broken down. Everyone is interested in seeing the end of the legend in their eyes, so they all take the next bus and bike to the destination. Baki also comes out, he sees the crowd, and they ask for Ogre. When Ogre jumps out, he tells Baki there is no reason why they should continue the fight, and they can pick it up another day. However, Baki refuses to listen. He says the reason his father wants to back down is because he is afraid of losing in front of that much crowd. He insists he will continue the fight, and he flies to hit Ogre 3 times. The jumps are so fast that no one really got to see it. When he returns, he realizes that Ogre didn't even move at all. Ogre cleans the blood in his nose and reminds Baki of his lesson, which is that a war can only be mutually ended. And if one of the parties doesn't want to end it, then the war must continue. Baki returns to his liquid form and tries to attack Ogre, but Ogre doesn't do much. Ogre asks him if he thinks he could use just one technique to attack him twice. Ogre attacks Baki and throws him off. Baki remembers the word insolence. He recalls he heard it from a legendary kung fu master, Kenichi Sawai. Ogre falls Baki to the floor, and with every attempt Baki makes to attack Ogre back, Ogre hits him on his face and makes him fall again. Baki feels falling, and he starts bleeding. His face is filled with tears, and no one is really sure if the tears are because of the humiliation he has gone through or the pain he is going through. All they all know is that Baki stands up again. He blows out all the blood in his nose, and his nose becomes dry. They wonder where the blood has gone, forgetting that the fastest way to stop bleeding for a warrior is the determination and willingness to fight. When a warrior is willing to fight, the determination pulls away the bleeding, and he summons his courage again. Baki stands up to his father again, but Ogre pushes him. At that moment, Baki sees that the person he wants to witness the fight has arrived. He shows off a new technique, a technique where he behaves and stands like an animal, and he stands like the opposite of the T-Rex. Ogre asks him how dare he do that, and everyone can see the animal in front of him. At that time, the strange person watching the match is sitter on the rooftop to enjoy the view. The creature he builds from the imitation becomes so obvious, everyone around here sees the creature, and they get terrified. To their shock, Baki disappears, and it is only the imitation that they can see. Ogre looks at the imitation, as it looks very familiar to him. Growing up, Ogre had always thought about the creature. He had always read about it and also watched it. The creature had never left his mind, and he also didn't want it to leave his mind. At that moment, the creature is still on his mind, and he takes that as a great opportunity to settle the issue he has once and for all. He tells Baki he had been looking forward to that opportunity. He sets out to defend himself, but the creature hits him with its 2 horns. The horns push Ogre, who tries to defend against it to no avail. Ogre holds on with his feet as the creature Baki had imitated keeps pushing him. Ogre eventually rests on a car, but Baki pushes him with the car until the car eventually flips and gets destroyed. Ogre gets his feet back, and he acknowledges that the power he has just experienced isn't a normal one. He says that for someone of Baki's strength and weight, it was nearly impossible for Baki to push Ogre, who is about 200 pounds, and not only push Ogre but also push and flip a car around the entire field. He acknowledges that the fight isn't a little and that power isn't ordinary. He about the great power of imitation, from the Yushokan, who imitates the bare fist style, to the Torokan, who imitates the Mantis fighting style, to the Kokaikan, who imitates the tiger and also the skill Baki had just used, which is the Kyoryukan. He claims he is glad Baki has learned his imitation skill to that extent, and he would also show Baki what real imitation looks like. He sets out with himself and starts to imitate an object. However, no matter the style he changes, Baki can't figure out what exactly he is trying to imitate. He calls Baki a fool and tells him he isn't trying to imitate anything. He says he imitates himself as the father of martial arts and the greatest warrior in that world, which no other warrior can defeat. Suddenly, Ogre's clothes get torn off his body, and a ray of light spreads around the entire field. It first passes from Baki's body to the other spectators. Baki eventually realizes what his father is imitating. He is getting the light from himself, which is his imitation. After Ogre shows him, Baki tells Ogre he doesn't know how to use the imitation. He claims that an imitation is not being judged on its appearance, and Ogre asks him what it is being judged on. Baki wonders if he has to be teaching his father something like that and says if Ogre doesn't know, then he has no choice. He walks towards Ogre, and to everyone's shock, Ogre falls on his face. A slow show of the event shows that as Ogre is about to hit Baki, Baki dodges the attack and hits Ogre, who falls. The spectators wonder what has gone wrong. Ogre stands up, and he commends Baki. He claims he isn't saying Baki hasn't been showing great skills since the beginning of the fight, but the exact one Baki had just shown is one which he is very shocked to experience. He says that Baki had done well and trained himself well, so Baki should come, and he wants to tap Baki's head. Since Baki was born, he has barely gotten any commendation from his father. Ogre had never patted his head before. He wonders if Ogre is trying to drag him closer so he can win the fight, but he realizes that Ogre's hand isn't closed and it is opened in the form of a pat. He feels a slow feeling in his chest, and it causes him to tear up. He had never felt this way before, and he calls Ogre selfish for not showing him love in that manner before. Most spectators also join him in tears because of the emotional moment. Not considering if Ogre is deceiving him, he decides to go for the patting, but he changes his mind in late minutes and dodges away. He reminds Ogre they are in an official fight. Ogre then drags him closer, squeezes him, and tells him he will show him the essence of strength. He says the essence of strength is being able to do whatever you want at any time you want it without considering if anyone else wants it. He forces Baki to get the patting and tells him that he can do anything he wants. He says the essence of real strength is the ability to command respect, and he throws Baki away. Baki gets weak. Ogre prepares to finish Baki up, but the man sitting by the rooftop confronts Ogre. The man, Pickle, tries to fight Ogre, but Baki stands up and hits him. His tooth falls off, and Baki tells him he isn't meant to interfere in the fight, even if Pickle doesn't understand why. He knows it is a general knowledge of the forest that a person shouldn't interfere in a fight he isn't called into. He feels bad for what he has done, and he has also lost his indestructible tooth, so he goes to meet the spectators and sits down. Baki realizes that he is less than his father in almost all aspects of life, in strength, speed, and muscle. He tells Ogre that he would prefer to change the dimension of the fight, and Ogre accepts. He accepts the dime Baki wants to go, and they set out to fight again. While Ogre agrees to take the second half of the fight to another level, as Baki has suggested, the both of them have their hands in their pocket, preparing for the second half of the fight. The second half of the fight isn't as spontaneous as the first one, and according to the technique they are preparing to use, they have to anticipate the other person's attack to make their defense. With their hands in their pocket, they must hope for the attack and defend. The spontaneousness of that technique doesn't seem acceptable to Ogre. He raises his hand and tells Baki that he isn't in for a surprise and will attack Baki after the count of 5. He puts his fingers out to count the 5 and says that when he gets to the 5th one, his finger will be folded, so he will use that fist to attack Baki. He begins his count, and when he reaches the 5th one and tries to attack Baki, Baki brings out a defense technique that shocks Ogre. It is the Tiger King technique. Baki hits Ogre on his first jaw to his second jaw and hits him on the floor. He doesn't stop at that. He also raises one of his hands up. Everyone is in awe. Even Baki is proud of himself. He asks his father what he wants to say in that proud moment. He asks if Ogre wants to say that he is anticipating that technique and Baki tries, but Ogre doesn't give him what he wants. Ogre refuses to say a word, and he lays on the floor. Baki gets angry. His entire fight is to get a reaction from his father, and he isn't ready for such a silent reaction. Ogre eventually gives him an okay signal. He puts his hand up, and he punches the floor. He puts a very large hole into the floor, and when he removes his hand, it brings out a very strong light that throws Baki away from his body, and Ogre stands up. Baki knows it doesn't get easier. He tells his father that he is still ready to fight. He urinates on his body and tells his father that he is ready to cry, urinate, deceive, and even go, as well as trick his father into winning that fight. Ogre acknowledges that his Tiger King technique is quite nice, but he doesn't expect his son to be a coward enough to urinate on his body. Baki doesn't care about that. He says that he will do anything for him to win that fight. As Baki goes ahead to hit Ogre, Ogre tells him it is about time the game gets serious. He says he will help his son to bring out the dormant technique in his DNA, and he will change him into the greatness that he is. Ogre's body changes, his back changes into the real form of an Oni, and it shows several signs. On the other hand, some architects find themselves in an ancient building. In the building, they find a very weird figure. The figure has the back of an Oni, and he is surrounded by several ammunition. The head of the team, Professor Chris, tells his colleagues that it is as though the military team of the country is attacking the man, and there is little or no probability that he can win. However, with the way the picture is, it is as though he is well prepared. Ogre goes ahead to hit Baki. He hits him with a car and the car crumbles. He keeps hitting him, and the people wonder if he is actually ready to kill his son. It is at that moment, although quite late, that Baki realizes he isn't going through a normal fight and he is in ultra-violence. He meets Ogre and says he would like them to stop the fight. He acknowledges that Ogre has great skills and that no one can defeat him, and considering whether or not they stop that fight is based on Ogre only. Ogre sees a figure that distracts him. He calls the person Dad, and when Baki turns, Ogre tells him it is his grandfather, Yujiro Hanma. Ogre greets his father, and Yujiro tells Baki that he can defeat Ogre if only he feels it in his mind that he can do so. Tokugawa realizes that Baki could see Yujiro. He tells his partner who Yujiro is and says he is the first person that can be said to defeat America. He tries to explain how Yujiro defeated America. It was at Okinawa during World War II on April 1, 1945, a war that went long for about 6 months until it eventually ended on the 7th of September in Kadena, where they all signed a mutual concession agreement that lasted till date. In that city was a very small island. It was just the shape of a circumference. The US Army waged an attack on the small islands with several pieces of ammunition that could destroy a large city. When he was asked if that ammunition was to destroy Japan, he said no, the ammunition had just one use, and it was to destroy a person on the island. There were bombs and guns from the water to the aerial shoots, and after the attack, the US Army sent some men to find the corpse of the man they intended to kill, Yujiro. In a mission that seemed like a joke at first, their vacation quickly ends when they see Yujiro coming with the head of one of the shooters. They return home after a failed mission, and their commander, James, feels embarrassed. He plans to use ammunition that has barely been used in years. It was a nuclear weapon, however, before he does that, the war ends. On a fateful night, the soldier on the US Marine ship sees something that changes his life. He sees Yujiro throw James' body on the ship, and James' body enters deep inside the ship. The other soldiers come out to the rare scene, and as they watch the body, they all see Yujiro. That day, Yujiro performs a very great technique called dress, and all the soldiers run into the water to escape, but they find it difficult to escape. After Yujiro leaves, Ogre tells Baki that he has just remembered his father's best technique, the dress technique. He tells Baki that he will show him his father's best technique, which was used to destroy all of the American Marine Corps. He says it is called dress in the American English language, but it is called the nunchucks in their language, meaning if it is being translated well, it should be translated into attire instead of dress. Irrespective of that, he was inspired to teach Baki that technique. He says he and his father were direct opposites of each other. They were polar opposites in everything they did in life, from dress to strength, attitude, and behavior. Despite that, there is something in his father that he can't deny was very awesome, which is the dress technique. Baki tries to attack him, but he holds Baki by his legs. He begins to swing Baki around. It seems like Baki is moving in the air. The swinging is so fast that everyone watching the scene can't see Baki moving, but they notice something is moving. The technique is called the nunchucks because it wraps the person in an attire, and it is that attire that is being thrown around in the air. It gives a significant effect, which is called the red out. The red out causes every organ in the victim's body to spray blood around. Baki's ears, eyes, nose, and every organ that is bringing out blood begins to emit blood. He begins to see red. The sky, the houses, the spectators, and even his father turn red. It seems as if Ogre is ready to kill his son. He walks toward the crumbled car and tells Baki that if he is really a Hanma, he should survive the hit. He says he doesn't care if Baki can hear him or not, but if Baki is a Hanma, Baki must survive. He hits Baki on the car repeatedly, not just on the minor part of the car but on the engine. Baki builds a protection technique, a technique which he uses to watch out for where he would be thrown, and plans to destroy it instead of destroying himself. He survives the attack, and Ogre holds him. Ogre asks him if he wants them to keep holding hands like that or if he wants a walk. Baki claims he isn't just holding hands with Ogre, instead, he wants to give Ogre a gift. He claims that with everything Ogre has done for him, Ogre indeed deserves a gift. He removes his hand and gives Ogre a doll. Ogre calls it a stupid doll, but Baki claims it is a samurai. Ogre wonders when Baki had built the samurai, and Baki tells him it was when Ogre was throwing him in the car. He had been taking some of the instruments in the engine, and he built it. Ogre realizes that Baki wasn't getting any injury from the hit. However, Baki tells Ogre he has more gifts, so he switches and hits Ogre. He hits Ogre so much that Ogre has fun with the attack. Ogre admits that he had reached the pinnacle of life and he was already getting bored. It was just like 5 prisoners who came to him because they wanted to feel the pain of losing. As for him, no one wanted to fight him again. He had lost the excitement of war because of his great strength. When a person gets to a level, he gets great strength that he would get power, fame, money, and prestige. In search of fights that would take him out of that boredom, he had traveled out of Japan. He had gone across the earth and to the north. He had fought martial artists and the world's strongest men. He had fought beasts and the strongest animals. He had fought countries and even their armies, but he had never reached that level of excitement. He never knew that what he had been looking for around the world was in his home. In fact, it was not just in his home. It was a part of him. They stand up again to fight, and Baki's girlfriend, Kazue, arrives. Baki asks her why she is there, and the other spectators wonder who she is. She tells Baki that everyone in the country is there, and there is no reason why she won't be there, too. She claims the news outlets have carried the news of the war and everyone has assembled. However, she tells them that if they want to fight, they should fight, as she isn't interested in one punch and one explanation. 2 punches and sentiments. They should stop with the discussion, and they should fight as real warriors. Baki tells her she is wrong. He acknowledges that there had been distractions in their fight, but he says such distractions are needed. He tells her that they aren't just mere warriors, and it isn't just a mere competition. It is a competition between a father and a son, and there have to be those moments for it to be worth it. He says the techniques he had used that day were techniques that he could only use against his father because he knew that they were deadly ones, and if he used them against any other person, they would die. So also his father, the techniques he had applied are ones that can be applied to only him. They continue the fight, and Ogre throws Baki off the field. Ogre walks to Kazue and tells her she has done well. She asks him if he thinks she hasn't given him the son he wanted, but Ogre says she has no fault and asks her to leave. She refuses to leave, and they continue their fight. Baki jumps on Ogre's neck to attack him, but he fails and he just sits on Ogre's neck. He sees that opportunity as a rare one. He had never had the opportunity to see his father's head that close by. Ogre carries him to the front and asks him if he is ready for the final battle. Ogre pushes Baki off and gets set to hit him. He hits Baki by his cheek, and blood begins to flow out of Baki's ears. He recalls that was the same thing he did to his wife. On the ancient floor, Professor Chris and his students see another drawing on the wall. This time, it is the drawing of a man, the same demon they have found on the first floor that was attacked by several ammunition, and in front of him is another man, who could be called a young boy because he looks younger, and behind the older man are several weak people. They stand there and looking at the image well. Professor Chris could assume that they look like weak people. They are from different races and ages. These people stay behind the older man, and Professor Chris explains that it could be said that they are the older man's supporters. He eventually declares that the drawing looks like the drawing of a father and son's fight. At the field, a man and his subordinate join the spectators. Since they had arrived late, they must stay at the back, and his subordinate asks if his boss didn't think they should go to the front. He offers to clear the people in front of them so they can have their perfect view of the front of the field, but his boss asks him not to worry. He says he is still seeing, and he prefers staying at that place. Ogre keeps hitting Baki on his face. He kept hitting his ears, and at that point, Baki could no longer hear. Ogre holds his cheek, asking him if he can hear him, and he tells Baki that the fight is eventually ending. He takes Baki's hand and stretches out his 5 fingers. He takes each of the fingers from the last of it and folds it. Baki remembers that scene. That was the first lesson he had ever gotten from his father when he was a kid. That day, his father told him that the hand was the greatest weapon. The fist is so powerful that it could be changed into anything. That day, he folds Baki's fingers into a fist and teaches Baki how to throw a punch. He tells Baki that in a fist fight, a person doesn't think about how to defend himself. Instead, all he thinks about is how to attack and fight his enemies. Hence, in a fist fight, the most important factor is how hard your attack is and how swift your landing is. To finish the fight, they begin a fist fight. They both throw the first punch at each other. The punch made the greatest and highest noise since the fight had started. It was heavy and heavenly. after which they throw several other punches at each other. Everyone watches as it shows a great fire scene. Baki doesn't see the punches as a normal one. He sees it as an opportunity to get closer to his father. All those hits he keeps giving his father seem to him like he is hugging his father. Ogre also stops reacting to the punch. He stands with his hands spread out as he accepts all of his son's punches, although it doesn't give him any reaction. Baki enjoys the greatest contact he would have with his father, and he keeps throwing the punches. Eventually, Ogre carries Baki. He squeezes Baki inside his hands, and Baki can see his rib breaking. He feels several ribs break, and he knows it is barely possible for him to win the fight. At this time, several news outlets have brought their equipment to the field. They have set the scene, and they are covering the entire fight for the people watching it in their houses. After Ogre squeezes Baki, he throws Baki on the floor. An older man comes out and sees it's Ogre fighting. He bows down and prays to Ogre, and he says the people there are foreigners and they don't know the importance of Ogre. He narrates that in the period, the Americans were maltreating the weak people. Ogre stood in front of them, and in front of him were the soldiers. He fought each of them and broke their weapons until he found his way to the president and fought for his people, which is why he is named Ogre. Immediately, Ogre throws Baki down. Almost every part of Baki's body fractures, and Ogre declares the fight has ended. As Ogre walks away, he gets a hit. He turns and sees that although Baki is still on the floor, Baki's fighting spirit refuses to die. And it is Baki's fighting spirit that has hit him. Baki's fighting spirit stands up to Ogre. He hits Ogre repeatedly until Ogre tells him to stop. Ogre decides he will end the fight officially. He starts preparing his favorite food in the air. He mixes his tofu with miso soup and tells Baki to stand up. He creates a table in front of them and asks Baki to eat. He asks if Baki is comfortable, but Baki says it's okay for them to eat anywhere. However, after Baki eats the meal, he feels it is salty. He tells Ogre, who refuses to believe, and he asks Ogre to eat the meal. As Ogre takes the bowl, Baki flips the table. Ogre picks the table up, and he sees the meal disappear. Baki tells Ogre that he has saved him. Ogre realizes that Baki found out about the salty meal and admits that Baki saved him. He eventually decides that only the strongest man can save another, so he declares Baki as the strongest man on Earth. In return, Baki also admits that he lost the fight when he lay on that floor, and he has no right to take the win, so he declares that his father won the fight. Baki is declared the strongest man on Earth, and Ogre wins the fight. They both leave the most important things to them, and Tokugawa comes out and declares the fight officially over. He happily declares it as the father and son hold hands.